I grew up in a small town in Texas where church was every Sunday morning and the American flag hung from every porch on the street. My mother sang in the church choir, and my father coached Little League on Saturdays. We were a picture-perfect American family, at least from the outside. Inside, life was quieter and more complicated than it looked. My parents loved each other in the practical, steady way that long marriages settle into. But there was not a lot of softness in our house. We didn't talk about feelings. We talked about responsibilities. We talked about what needed to be done and who was going to do it. Music was the one place I could go that was entirely mine. By the time I was 8, I was singing in the church choir beside my mother. By 12, I was writing my own songs in a notebook I kept under my mattress. By 16, I was performing at county fairs, local events, small bars that looked the other way about my age when I had a guitar in my hands. Music was not just something I did, it was the only version of myself I fully believed in. When I was on a stage with a microphone in front of me, I felt like I finally made sense. When I turned 18, I enlisted in the U.S. Army. People who knew me as a singer were surprised. But I needed structure in a way I couldn't articulate at the time. I needed to belong to something large enough to hold me. The Army offered both, and for the first couple of years it delivered. I felt useful. I felt like I was part of something that mattered. I had direction, discipline, and a reason to get out of bed before the sun came up. Then came the first deployment. I won't say where. I'll say it was loud and strange and nothing like what training prepares you for. I came back from that one still recognizable as myself, even if the edges had changed. The second deployment was different. Something happened over there, a specific night, a specific moment that I haven't spoken about publicly and probably never will. All I can say is that I came home carrying something that had no name and no exit. A weight that moved with me through every room, every conversation, every hour of sleep that wasn't really sleep at all. I was diagnosed with PTSD about 8 months after returning. I went to the appointments, I took the medication, I followed the program, and showed up and did every single thing I was supposed to do. And still, at 2 in the morning, when the apartment was dark and the city outside was quiet, I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. The music kept coming, but from a darker place now. I was writing songs about reaching for something that never reaches back, about screaming into a silence that stays silent, about the specific loneliness of standing in a crowded room and feeling invisible in the middle of it. My bandmates said it was artistic depth. I knew I was slowly coming apart. I started drinking more than I should. Not dramatically, not the kind of drinking that ends in scenes or wakes people up at 3 in the morning with panicked phone calls. Just enough to make the nights shorter. Just enough to turn down the volume on whatever was living inside my chest. I was functioning. I was performing. I was keeping all my appointments, and I was completely, entirely hollow. One night in February, at almost 2 in the morning, I was lying in my apartment in Killeen, scrolling my phone the way you do when sleep won't come and you've already run out of every other distraction. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I wasn't searching. The algorithm just took me somewhere I hadn't been before. A woman was speaking quietly to a camera. No production, no studio, just her face and her voice. And she was talking about prayer in Islam. She wasn't defending it or arguing for it or trying to convince anyone of anything. She was just describing the experience, what it felt like, physically and emotionally, to press her forehead all the way to the ground and speak to God when she had absolutely nothing left to offer. And then she said something that stopped everything inside me completely. She said, "For the first time in my entire life, I felt like someone was actually listening." I played that video 4 times. I put my phone face down on the mattress eventually and lay there until the room started turning gray with morning light. I didn't pray. I didn't open another tab. I just lay there with those words sitting in the middle of my chest. For the first time in my entire life, I felt like someone was actually listening. I hadn't realized until that exact moment how deeply I had needed exactly that. Not advice, not a diagnosis, not someone to fix what was broken in me, just to be heard by something that wouldn't grow tired, by something that wouldn't eventually leave. Over the next few weeks, I started reading about Islam. Quietly, carefully, almost secretly. I used incognito mode on my browser. I laugh at that now, but at the time I was genuinely afraid of what people would think if they somehow found out. I was a soldier from Texas. I had been raised in a Christian household. I had performed the national anthem at military ceremonies. What possible reason did I have to be reading about Islam? And yet, every time I tried to stop, I found myself opening another article, reading another chapter, staying up another hour. I read about Salah, the 5 daily prayers that structure a Muslim's entire day, not occasional, not optional, 5 times every single day, woven into the rhythm of waking and eating and resting. I had grown up with Sunday church and bedtime prayers that felt like interruptions in real life. This felt like the opposite. Like prayer wasn't interrupting life, like it was the spine that held life upright. I read about the names of God in Islam. There were 99 of them, but the one I kept returning to was Al-Qarib, the near one. And then the verse, He is nearer to you than your jugular vein. I read the sentence over and over, maybe 20 times in a single sitting. I didn't understand it theologically yet. I wasn't trying to, but something below the level of thinking, something in the body, recognized it the way you recognize your own name when someone says it across a noisy room. I found a mosque about 40 minutes from base. I drove there on a Saturday morning without telling anyone where I was going. I sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes, watching people walk through the front door, and then I started the car and drove home. I did the exact same thing the following Saturday, and the one after that. 3 weeks in a row, I sat in that parking lot and told myself next time, and then I left without going in. The fourth Saturday, I turned off the engine and I got out of the car. The woman who opened the door was named Fatima. She was maybe 45, soft-spoken, with warm, dark eyes and a scarf in deep blue. She didn't ask me what I was doing there. She didn't ask what I believed or how I had found them or what I was looking for. She looked at me, just looked, the way someone looks when they actually see you, and then she smiled and said, "Welcome. Can I get you some tea?" I nearly fell apart right there in the doorway. Something about the complete simplicity of it, the total absence of suspicion or agenda, broke through every wall I had carefully built for the occasion. I had come in prepared to explain myself. I didn't have to explain a single thing. She led me to a quiet room and sat beside me. We talked for almost 2 hours. She shared parts of her own story, without prompting, without performance. She answered the questions I asked, and she let silence sit comfortably between the answers, which is something very few people know how to do. By the time I left that afternoon, I had agreed to come back for the women's weekend class. I attended those classes for 8 weeks straight. I told almost no one what I was doing. My roommate on base thought I was taking a beginner's Arabic course for deployment purposes. My family in Texas thought I was buried in extra training cycles. I was living 2 separate lives, and the weight of that was real and exhausting. But I could not make myself stop going. Every week something shifted. The hollow feeling that had been my companion for so long, I had stopped noticing. It began to shrink. Not disappear, shrink, making room for something else. The lesson that broke me completely open was about the physical act of prostration, the moment in prayer when you press your forehead all the way to the ground. My teacher explained that in that position, the brain, the part of us that houses pride and ego, and the constant, exhausting performance of selfhood, is physically lower than the heart. She said that scholars described it as the moment of greatest nearness to God, the closest the human body can come. I drove home that night in silence. I walked straight to my room and I put my forehead on the floor. No prayer mat, no Arabic words, no ritual. Just me, the carpet, and something enormous and quiet that I was finally allowing myself to reach toward. And I cried. For a long time. Not from sadness, from release, something that had been compressed inside me for years. Something from the deployment and the nights that didn't make sense and the version of myself I had been performing for everyone around me. It started, slowly, to move. I took my Shahada on a Thursday afternoon in March. 12 women sat in a circle around me. I said the words in Arabic first, stumbling gently over the sounds, and then in English. I bear witness that there is no God but God. I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. It took less than a minute, and yet it was the most significant minute of my entire life. I walked in as one person and walked out as someone who, for the first time, felt completely honest about who she was. The weeks that followed were not easy, and I want to say that plainly, because I know these stories are often told with too much light and not enough truth. My mother cried when I called her, not from anger, from a fear that comes from loving someone and not understanding what is happening to them. My father went silent for almost 3 weeks, not cold, just somewhere deep inside himself, processing something he didn't yet have words for. I lost 2 friendships I had believed were solid. Distance without explanation carries its own particular weight, and yet, underneath every hard conversation, underneath every night that felt uncertain, underneath the grief of losing things I had thought were permanent, there was a stillness in me that I had never, not once in my life, experienced before. A quiet that had nothing to do with what was happening around me. I had chased that quiet for years, through music, through ambition, through belonging, through the army, through other people. It never came from any of those places. It came now through surrender, through putting down the performance, through speaking honestly to something I finally truly believed was listening. That is what Islam means, surrender. I still make music. The gift didn't leave when everything else changed. It deepened. I wrote a song about the night I put my forehead on the floor, and I played it at the mosque one quiet evening in a circle of women. Just me and my guitar and 12 faces that knew exactly what the words meant. Fatima sat in the front row with the same warm smile from the day she handed me tea at the door. 6 months after my Shahada, my mother flew out to visit. I could see the nervousness in how she carried herself, that careful, braced posture she gets when she doesn't know what to expect. I cooked dinner. We sat on the porch together until late, talking about everything and nothing, and all the space in between. Before she left, she took both my hands in hers and said quietly, "I don't understand it all yet, Christine, but I can see something in you that wasn't there before, and whatever it is, it's good." That was everything. That was more than I had hoped for. If you are somewhere I used to be, curious and afraid, sitting in a parking lot, convincing yourself that next week you'll be brave enough, I want you to know something real. You do not have to have it all figured out before you take the first step. You do not need every answer before you walk through the door. You just need one step. Get out of the car, walk to the door, accept the tea. The rest will come to meet you. I am living proof of that.